Hey, what's up guys? This is 3D Bonfire, my name is Marcus and this is part 2 of my course Digital Nature using Megascans and Octane. Let's go for it. So, you can watch this course independently from part 1, but if you want to get an introduction into Quixel Megascans and how to use the Quixel bridge with LiveLink, consider to watch part 1 first. I also talk briefly about the Octane Scatter object and we get some fundamentals. This time we finally talk about animating our plant growth systems, so without further ado, let's watch some videos and get this going. Alright, let's have another look on these videos. These growing patterns still look lovely. I already showed them in part 1, but this time let's go a little bit quicker through it. So this looks nice. This one grows from the left, and you may be already ask yourself how I did this growing kind of animation. And I think it is finally time to reveal the secret sauce behind it. It is not dark magic. It is just a simple and clever use of After Effects noises. I guess this sounds a little bit disappointing, but I have to tell you, noises are super powerful, and now would be the point where we switch to After Effects to create our own noise textures and do it. Alright guys, welcome to After Effects, your favorite tool to create grayscale textures. Previously I called them accidentally noises because these textures we are going to create look a little bit like scaled up or zoomed in noises, but the textures we create offer more control and can be art directed easier than you could do it with a simple noise. I guess that sounds a little bit confusing, so I will better show you. So what we basically want to achieve is a texture like this one. I set it to a duration of 10 seconds and we go from a full black image to a full white image. And black resembles zero growth, or let's say the plants have a growth of 0, they are invisible, and they scale up until everything is visible. So white is full grown plants, black is invisible plants, and all the gray values between it give us a gradual growth until they are fully visible. So this is super simple, and how I do these kind of masks or textures I will show you in an example. So this is how I would do it. I just made a composition. Here you can see my settings, put it to a duration of 10. That just means our animation that I want to achieve is 10 seconds long, and this is my size of the texture. First I would say press down Ctrl and Y and make a solid, fill it up with white. Now you have to decide where you want to start your animation. That's why we grab the pen tool, and I want to start it from here. So I just make a kind of a shape here. Oops, I put it on a shape layer. Let's do it once again. Something like this. Alright, press MM on your solid, and the expansion is our main parameter, so we start on 0 and we go to 10 seconds and just fill it up with white. When you press down Shift while you're sliding, you can move in increments of 10, by the way. So fill it up with white. This is the main principle, but this looks kind of boring, right? First I would say, because we don't want to pop our plants in from 0 to 1 in this harsh kind of fashion, we put some feather in it. And I just go with a value of 300. So this means we go from 0 to 1 in a gradual kind of way. Alright, still kind of boring. So we use the effect turbulence displacement, put it onto it, and this looks more interesting. Now our white color is moving through a noise, and this gives us a way more organic reveal. I think the amount is too low, so I would say slide it up. Maybe we go to 180. Yes, we are getting there. The size, let's see. So this doesn't make so much sense. I would just trust my guts. Let's say 120. Yes, this is working for me. And now, because we want to have more complexity in it, we use the parameter complexity. And I would say, just put it to a value of 3.5. And yes, kind of like that. Maybe I go down with the size a little bit. And basically this is it. So this is working for me. And in these other results, I will show you some similar methods, but change the parameters a little bit and we get different results. So let's start with the scene 1 static mask. And as you can see, this is pretty much the same result we achieved here like we did in the example file. So up to 10 seconds, I animated my mask expansion, put some feather in it and applied the turbulent displacement effect. I called this one big because the size of it is rather high, so we get some big shapes with it. Next one, 2, static mask more complexity. The name is already telling it. This just has a different complexity value. I put it up to 9 and this gives you this kind of look. So sometimes you need more rounded shapes, but sometimes you want this extra complexity. So this is depending on your 3D setup, what you want to achieve. Alright, next one is static mask more complexity, evolution and detail displacement. What a complex name for something that simple. So I just make a quick preview for it. This setup has some benefits to it. You already can see how this is behaving. Like here is some additional animation in it. So while we fill up our texture, while this white field is growing, the noise field we are moving through is animating in itself. So this has an animated evolution value, which gives us a noise field that is moving, and while we fill it up, we get some additional movement. So you see all of this has a way more complex behavior to it, like we have it, for example, in this case. So here you can see we just had some filling up with it. We fill it up, but we don't get this extra movement. And I think this is something that is quite nice. So what we did is we animated the evolution parameter, and additionally I split my turbulent displacement into a big and a detail one. This means here with this one, with this turbulent displacement, we achieve these rather big shapes. So this is the setup. The second one is only has an effect on the details. That's why I called it big and detail. So you see. And the evolution is keyframed from 0 to 10 on also the big one and the detail. And they have different keyframes to it. So the big one has an evolution of only three cycles, and the detail has an evolution of 12 cycles. This just means I give the detailed ones a bigger, a faster animation pattern than the big ones. And this makes totally sense because this big shapes shouldn't be so hectic, but the details, they can be more complex and faster. And this is what we achieve here. I think this is quite a beautiful pattern, and we definitely can work with this one. So let's see the next one. This is for multiple masks. And as the name already suggests, we just have multiple masks on our white solid. This has the benefit that we can offset our animations from different directions. So we start here, then this one is kicking in, and last one from here. So you see, I start here, there, and then there. So this has definitely its benefits. And The interesting thing maybe about this one is it feels almost like these different areas have a feeling for their neighbors. So they come closer and closer until their border is getting thinner and thinner. And finally they merge into one big white solid. And I think this pattern is super nice, and it would be hard to achieve something like this with another system. So super useful. Next one, 5 animate mask. This one has additional keyframes on the mask path parameter. Until now we leave this as a static value, but this time we put keyframes into here. And this has the benefit that we get some extra control on the direction of our texture. Yeah, so on frame 0, here I have keyframe, then on second 5, I move my points here, and then I decided to go down with these points, and yeah, when I do it, then I get some extra direction to go this, so you can mix this one on top to get extra control with it. 6 example, make fringe. Okay, this is an example. Let's do a fringe here, or something like a shockwave. We start with a similar result we get in static mask or in the example we already did, but this time we want to have a leading edge or a fringe or shockwave, however you want to call it. And to achieve this, I would just, let's say, duplicate my solid white and go to the solid settings, and why not fill it up with black? We are already there. Well, not exactly. I would say we could get a better result when we just offset this one. So you see, now we get something like a fringe or a shockwave. And we will definitely have uses for this technique. The cool thing about it, you could easily press MM on this one and change the interpolation and the front edge or the edge behind it by, I would say, just animate change the feathering. So this doesn't make sense that the shockwave would lead a harsh edge behind it. I would say this one should be soft and the leading edge could be a little bit more harsh. So could be something like this, right? So this is coming in a brutal, harsh kind of fashion and is leaving something more soft behind it. So I will show you what we can do with this technique. 7 static mask fringe. This one is basically the example we did here. So we have a solid black on top of the white one, offsetted. But this time we have another size. This is just 80. The example we did with 170. That's why we have big shapes here and smaller shapes here. So by changing all the kinds of parameters, you will get different looks here. Static mask fringe fast. Other than the stupid name, this is just a faster version to resemble more like a real shockwave. Alright guys, I will render these ones out and then we will have a look on how they translate from 2D into 3D. See you. Alright, let's compare these noises. As I said, I rendered all of these ones out, so you see here's a static mask, more complexity, version 3 with the detail displacement and the animated evolution. And I think we should discuss everyone in detail. So, as you can see, this texture, I used them in Cinema 4D, in the shader effector, to scale up from 0 to 1 my clone system. And just think of these ones as plants. Just to stay efficient and to kick them out rapidly, I put in cubes. And it's just for explanation. So what we can see here is, when I just go to this one, you see this one with more complexity definitely translates all these details into your 3D scene. So this is just a 3D representation of your 2D noise. When you compare these ones, lots of detail, less detail. Depending on your scene and what you are going for, you choose something with less or with more. So this depends on your scene. And I think the more interesting comparison here would be between version 2 and 3. And maybe lead your eye to this area, okay? So when you look close, and maybe it's a perception thing, I think I can feel it and I can also see it, that this one has some extra movement in it. So look again close how this is moving. So I can definitely see and feel there is something going on extra in comparison to this one. So when we look here, you see this is scaling up in a rather a little bit more boring way. Yeah. Okay. Example 1, 2, 3. Let's go to the next one. 4 multiple masks and 5 animated masks. Let's see. This one is already kicking in and I think they just turn out as expected. It is just a translation from 2D into 3D, right? So nothing special about this one. Maybe let me direct your eye in this area. You can see here this interpolation is quite harsh. This is why this is also going from 0 to 1 quite rapidly, while this has a gradual movement to it, interpolation, because you also have the gradient in your mask. Static mask, fringe and static mask combined. Let's see. This is going a little bit too slow for me, so I just scrub through it. Alright, this by now shouldn't be a surprise how this is translating into 3D. This is more interesting because here we go to the principle I will use for more complex systems, okay? So in Cinema 4D, this would be an Octane Scatter and this would be a second Octane Scatter. And each of them is influenced by its own shader effector, and each of these shader effector is influenced by another texture. So this system is using this noise, and the second one is using this noise. And sorry for always saying noise, I just mean texture, okay? Yeah, so this is the magic behind getting more complex systems. Here I have a separate shockwave version. This is more aggressive than the last one, this fringe. It has just mainly to do with the speed of it, and also while we move through, the Octane Scatter also has an effector which gives it a value in the y-axis, so these cubes are thrown up a little bit and then they fall down more gradually to the back of the shockwave. And while we do this, you also give it some rotation value to give it some aggressive randomness, and this would be how you could create a shockwave with this technique. Next one is called offset, and slowly I reveal the true magic behind these kind of scenes, and I already gave you a hint on it. The thing is, you need multiple Octane Scatter systems, okay? So here I have 1, 2, 3 systems, each with its own geometry in it. Think of this could be like little stones, this could be small plants, bigger plants, and on and on. And to get a complex way, I would say, for example, you could do it with 5 Octane Scatters or even 10 with different plants and layer them up in this kind of fashion. And the important thing about it is you need to time offset your textures. So each has its own shader effector influencing it with a texture in it, and they basically use the same texture, but they kick in gradually over time. So this starts at 0, the next one could be, for example, kicks in 2 seconds later, and this 4 seconds later. And by layering in time, by offsetting it in time, you get a gradual growth of your system that is believable. I will show you in detail how this works later. Okay, just to round this chapter up, here once again my animations I did, we don't need to talk about them in detail, but here you can clearly see how this 2D noise or texture, however you want to call it, out of After Effects is translating into my 3D file. So I can see the shape here, and clearly this is a representation of my texture. See? Yeah, okay. So this is maybe interesting. So as I told you, you need multiple Octane Scatter systems and you layer them and offset them in time. So in this case I had, I guess this is 10 Octane Scatter systems. The first one is kicking in with little stones. Next one, soil, little plants, and you go up to bigger plants. So when you have a look again here, you can see first comes in these little stones, mud pieces, little plants, bigger plants. This is the secret behind it. Okay, and here this is using the multiple masks, and as I mentioned, I really like this pattern here, how this is coming closer to the border and finally it eats up the whole scene. This is quite nice. And in this case, I also used like 10 Octane Scatter systems, and I went from little pieces of moss up to little plants and yeah, to the big ones. So pretty simple. This one, nothing special about this. We can go through the next examples quite quickly. So this is using a more complex noise with different shapes. This one is using the same one. And why shouldn't you use the texture you once created multiple times? And lastly, this one is also using the same noise. And maybe just as a quick reminder, if your computer system isn't powerful enough to clone all these plants into your scene, just go with cylinders, cubes and rings and whatever you want to. Alright, so this is the end of this section, and I think next we should finally go to Cinema 4D and I'll show you in a scene file how I set it up. Okay, sorry guys, I was a little bit too fast here, so 2 more videos to go and then I will promise we go to Cinema 4D and do the work finally. Okay, I just want to give you a quick reminder on how you could achieve some animation in it. The secret is you just use a random effector which is influencing your rotation values of your plants or cubes in this case. So maybe this example is a bit more explanatory. So let's see. Focus your eye on this one. My cylinders rotate by 10 in pitch and rotate by 10 in banking. This is just the angle of movement here. The animation speed is 10, which is super slow, but when you combine 10 systems on top of each other, and each of them has a little bit different values, you will get something that looks quite realistic, okay? The noise field has a scale of 45. Next one, concentrate your view here, please. Same rotation, pitch, and banking, but the animation speed goes up to 20, so this is twice as fast. And yes, I think this also could look quite believable. The scale of the noise field is 20, that's why the noise resolution is finer here. Next one has a noise field of 300. You can see the noise, now you can clearly see the noise, how it's translating into your clones. I think this doesn't work so good, but the animation speed here would be 30, which is faster, and rotation, pitch and banking also, I doubled it up, so the angle of movement is more here. This doesn't look so believable, but if you stay in rather low numbers and combine your systems, your Octane systems, with different random effectors with slightly different values, you get something that looks quite believable. Okay, and now it is time to go to Cinema 4D finally. See you there. Alright guys, I finally managed to go to Cinema 4D, and I think now it is time to show this technique how it works. So therefore here is a plane already. I set it to a scale of 1000 by 1000 centimeters with a resolution of 250 by 250. I already have an Octane daylight in it and just slightly angled it towards my plane. Alright, so what we want to do is clone objects onto this plane, right? Okay, so why don't we just grab a cylinder? I think the cylinder as an object to clone is too big, so just make it smaller, and maybe to have it a little bit more interesting, we put a slight fillet on it. This is good enough for me. Put it aside, and maybe I just put a plain, simple material on it, just a blue material. Alright, so since we want to talk about the Octane Scatter, why don't we throw one into our scene? Put the cylinder into the Octane Scatter. The Octane Scatter should distribute over the surface of our plane. Voila! Put this to 10,000 to get some ground coverage here. This looks nice, but a little bit boring, so why don't we use a random effector. Put it into the effectors list, and we don't want to randomize the position but the scale. And let's say we just put a slight variation into this one. This looks quite nice. I think the cylinder is still too big for me. I scale it down and use a little bit more clones here. Maybe even 20,000. Oops. Okay, this is a nice foundation. Next, before we use the technique, maybe I just make this plane a little bit more interesting by put a displacer beneath it, and let's say the height variation is 200, and let's throw not a texture but a simple cinema 4D noise into it. Let's scale this up massively just to have some bumps in our scene. So this is just looking more interesting. Alright, cool. Now we come to the interesting part. Now we use a shader effector. And the shader effector we want to use to make our clones invisible and turn them back to visibility. So we put the shader effector also into our effectors list. And now they are invisible, but we go to the shading and just throw a texture in it. We use this static mask with the beautiful name and go into it and say animation and calculate it. Now we have something like a growth simulation, but it is the wrong way around, right? So we start with full visibility and go to invisible. This is not what we want. And the problem is, when we were in After Effects, we should have made this texture the other way around. So we should have started with white and go to full black. But since we did it the other way, I would say we just switch this black and white point. Like make this 0 and 1, and there we are. So this is what we want. Alright, so this, I would say this is our Octane Scatter system 1, and I just call it 0 because it starts at 0. We want to layer multiple systems on top of each other, right? So I would just call this one 20 because I want the second system to start at frame 20. Alright, and this cylinder, just to make it visible, we just give it another color. Right now they lay on top of each other. This is not what we want. That's why we go to the shader effector and go to the shading here, to animation, and now it is time to offset this animation. Therefore, we change this from exact seconds to range. We know our animation is 330 frames long. That means when we want to start at 20, we need to go up to 350, right? By doing it so, this animation starts 20 frames behind the first one. So when we just make these ones a little bit higher, you can see here is a 20 frame offset. And if you think a little bit more in a plant ecosystem, you should think of this like little stones and soil, and this is the first plant, which is rather small. But nothing holds you back from doing this multiple times. So you could make another system, call this one 40, and put a green material on this one. Just to see it, we just scale this up to 50, but this time we go to the shader effector here and just say this is starting at 40 and goes to 350, 370. Alright, and we have another offset. So this is really super simple, right? But really effective. And just by layering the systems on top of each other and give them a time offset, you can achieve animations like I did. Okay, I just saw a distracting detail around the edge, so we don't want to have these cylinders appear here. So an easy way to fix this would be make a right click here and say current state to object, throw this one out, click onto your Octane scatters, put the plane back here, put it back into it, maybe for a second make them invisible, click on your plane, click Ctrl A to select everything, click the letter I to make an extrude inner, just drag a little bit to get a little border here, make a UI inverse selection and throw these ones out. Now when you activate your Octane scatters again, your borders should be smooth and clear. Alright, so I think next I will show you one of my scene files, how I did the same technique with a plant setup. See you there. Alright, so this is one of my scene files. It's rather simple, and by now we should know everything how this is working. Maybe just a quick introduction what we have here. So in the scene objects, I just have a plane over here with all my assets. This is my landscape. I just put also a little bit noise onto it, like we did in the example. This has just a final resolution. Okay, I have two assets here. They also come with the bridge into Cinema 4D. I have a stage object which is switching between two cameras. This is not relevant for our scene, and the Octane Sky with a HDRI. Use whatever you want here. Alright, also really useful when you work with multiple Octane Scatter objects, because when you switch all of them on, you activate all of them, the scene could get a little bit slow. So quite helpful is to have a selection object in your scene. You could just press Shift C and press Selection Object. Selection object is this one, and drag it into your scene. And drag all your scatters in here, and then you can easily activate and deactivate them to make your scene faster or slower. Alright, so maybe I just show you some of these assets, but you can see I named them. This first one is Moss and it starts at 0, next one 20, 40, 55, 70 and on and on. So this is just an artistic decision which numbers you like here. For me this one's worked. And the moss, you can see inside my scatter, I have different moss assets. I can show you here. So these are just little clumps of moss. Yeah. Go back to my scene. So when I would say, let's go to a frame like 180, you can already see this moss is coming in. And by the way, I'm using in my shader visible. I just called it visible. This is the effect that scales up from -1 to visibility. So without them, everything would be visible, right? But when you switch it on, you get this this animation. So this is animating in. Yes, okay. So shader visible is using my texture. This one, this is the animation, and here you throw in your animation. And in this case, it was this 4 multiple masks. Super simple. The random scale is randomly scaling up our moss clumps. Otherwise it would look too irregular. You can see it here. So when I put some randomness inside here, this looks way more interesting. And the parameter is just scaled up by 2. I also put a random rotation around this axis. It's turning here around 600. So this is giving additional randomness. Oh, yeah, I like this look. So this is how the moss is working. Next one starts at frame 20, and this is just another asset. You choose your assets by yourself. Let's see how this is looking. Shader, shader areas, I will show you later. So this is again the shader visible doing its thing here in the animation, but with an offset of 20. By now you should notice, and I won't talk about it again. This one has also the rotation and the random scale, but it has also, so when I do a store render buffer here, and it's also using shader areas, this is how I called it. And this is just scaling some parts of it down that it is not fully covering the scene. So when you mix different plants on top of each other, you need to be a little bit, you need to make selections where you want to grow stuff. So in this case, I put a shader areas here, I called it areas, which is also scaling it down by -1. And in the shading, I use a noise, which works similar like our textures with black and white values, and played a little bit with the sliders. So when I put this one back, you can see, maybe I store this buffer. When I switch how this noise, this black and white mask is interpolated here, you can see when I go down with the brightness, more of this is appearing. And when I change this, I go back to something I had. So you can put noises into this one. I could also scale down this noise and get a different pattern. Yeah, so this is another noise pattern. So also pretty simple. This is the second one. Next one is starting at 40 and is pretty much doing the same, but this time I also put in some wind. Okay, so this one doesn't have wind because it's more rigid, but I decided for this penny word, or what's the name of this one? No, here it's called sidewalk vegetation whatsoever. This one kicks in at shader visible, kicks in at 40. This also has a plane effector, which is moving everything up in the y-axis by 1.5 just to make it a little bit more visible. And you can see these plants here. And in addition, this one also has the shader areas with the noise, with another noise here, and a random wind effector. And I showed you earlier in this tutorial, you can put an animation speed and a scale of your noise inside here and say in the parameters how much the rotation angle is. I just put it to 4x4, and together these values give you over time some animation, and this resembles some wind breathing breathing through your scene. So yeah. Alright, the next one, 55. By now you should get a little bit bored by these explanations. This is kicking in at 55. Just another layer of clones. So now we could go fast here. It all works the same, but I think the shader areas, they just use a different noise to decide where things should appear. And also the wind varies a little bit here. So I guess you can see this has 8 and 8 as a rotation angle, and an animation speed of 12 and a noise scale of 50. Alright, so I think I just can activate all of them now, and the system is always the same. Okay, and this would be our result. Alright guys, this is it. I'm curious how you will use this technique and what you come up with. Maybe you want to share this stuff with me on Instagram. It's Megascans3D. And if you enjoyed this course so far, consider to leave a thumbs up or even subscribe to this channel, so this fire will continue to burn. Alright, I will come with something exciting in the future, be sure about it. Have fun, bye.